Good news! The US and China are headed straight for a military clash, which means you'll soon be drafted, and Call of Duty will have new material for at least 20 more sequels. But while China's facing an uphill battle against the United States military, some of the weapons it's bringing to the fight are a grave threat to American forces. YJ-12, YJ-18, and YJ-21 Eagle Strike anti-ship missile. The YJ-12 is China's standard anti-ship missile, and in a not-so-subtle nod to its intended targets, the missile was named Eagle Strike for its projected role in smashing American ships to pieces. The missile is mostly deployed by Chinese aircraft such as the J-10, J-11, J-16, and H-6 bomber, but has been adapted to be fired from some Chinese ships. The missile was in development as early as 2004, but has been active since at least 2015. The YJ-12 is known to have been adapted to be fired from coastal launchers stationed along China's illegally reclaimed islands in the South China Sea. As a primary line of defense versus U.S. surface action groups, the YJ-12 is a very capable missile with a range of around 300 miles and packing a warhead between 450 to 1,100 pounds. In every way, the YJ-12 is a significant upgrade over the aging American Harpoon anti-ship missile, which still makes up a significant amount of U.S. anti-ship firepower. Unlike any American missile, though, the YJ-12 features the ability to conduct a short supersonic sprint once close to the target, boosting itself up as fast as Mach 4 in order to evade air defenses. This could give friendly forces less than a minute to act to an incoming threat, as the missile also flies low to the ocean and under the radar horizon of target ships. Meant to be fired in volleys, the YJ-12's ability to conduct supersonic sprints in the terminal phase means that the odds of a SAG defending itself from every incoming missile are low. The 300-mile range also allows the Chinese bombers to strike from far away, improving their odds of evading interception by American combat air patrol. The flexibility of being air-launched also allows the missile to be fired from multiple different vectors, further complicating defensive intercepts if coordinated together. Lastly, unless intercepted early, the YJ-12's ability to conduct a supersonic sprint means that incoming debris could still prove fatal to the crew and damaging to any ship caught in its path. If the YJ-12 has one weakness, it's that the missile cannot be deployed from vertical launch cells, limiting its deployment on surface vessels. However, that's not a problem for the YJ-18, which was designed from the onset to be carried aboard both surface and subsurface platforms, such as the Type 95 submarine, which will be equipped with vertical launch cells. The YJ-18 features a smaller warhead, anywhere between 310 to 660 pounds, and a lower speed, as it cruises at subsonic speeds toward its target. Its range is similar to the YJ-12, though limited by the fact that it cannot be deployed from the air. Like the YJ-12, though, the YJ-18 also conducts a supersonic sprint of up to Mach 3 when fired in anti-ship mode. The missile is widely believed to be heavily based on the Russian Caliber design, which might be bad news for China and good news for the U.S. As American-made Patriot air defense systems have shown in Ukraine, U.S. forces can easily intercept Caliber cruise missiles, though these are fired in high land attack trajectories and not in the same flight profile as an anti-ship missile would be. However, one thing that Patriot's operation in Ukraine has proven is that U.S. missile defense capabilities are likely far more formidable than we have previously been aware of. That's why China has gotten to work on a newer generation of anti-ship missiles, and leading the charge is the YJ-21. This hypersonic missile is almost a complete unknown. We have only Chinese military handouts for information, and, well, China has been known to greatly exaggerate capabilities at times. Much has been touted about the new generation of hypersonic weapons, with claims that they are unstoppable and unkillable by any air defense system in the world. This is largely true, though only specifically about maneuverable hypersonic weapons. Russia tried to play the hypersonic card with its Kinzhal missiles in order to create fear in the West. But the truth is that Kinzhal cannot maneuver at hypersonic speeds and is only a hypersonic weapon in the sense that most ballistic missiles become hypersonic in their terminal descent. Without the ability to maneuver, hypersonic weapons are as easy to intercept as any other missile. Easier even, as they're stuck to very predictable ballistic trajectories. It's the advent of maneuverable hypersonics that's the true game changer, and China claims to have that capability with the YJ-21. However, modern hypersonic weapons are increasingly expensive weapons, with a very real possibility that America's current efforts could end up producing a $100 million hypersonic missile. That's just not the type of weapon you use on any normal target, as it would be prohibitively expensive, even for the seemingly bottomless U.S. military budget, to field a large quantity of them. However, if China has truly created a modern, maneuverable hypersonic missile, then the price tag could be well worth it to sink a multi-billion-dollar U.S. aircraft carrier. Star Shadow Combat Drone. The future is drone. If the Ukraine war has proven anything, it's the necessity of unmanned combat platforms for future warfighting, and in very large numbers. But while the current war is mostly focused on recon and drones with small payloads, a future confrontation between major powers will put the emphasis on highly capable combat drones capable of taking on both manned and unmanned air targets and a whole lot more. Air defenses are becoming increasingly formidable, and the vulnerability of even stealth aircraft is ever increasing. Thus, nations around the world have settled on a common theme for their respective sixth-generation fighter designs: the concept of unmanned disposable wingman drones. While the Chinese 6th-gen fighter is nowhere on the horizon, that doesn't mean that its combat drone technology isn't advancing. In all likelihood, Chinese air combat drones will hit the battlefield far sooner than their 6th-gen counterparts that they'll eventually escort. Like most next-generation Chinese weapons, there's very little that's independently verifiable about the Storm Shadow combat drone. Instead, we're forced to rely on deduction and snippets from official Chinese information releases. What we do know is that the mysterious Star Shadow drone may have been filmed for the first time a year ago. The drone bears a strong resemblance to the American X-47B, which was originally meant to be a combat drone until pushback from the Navy fighter pilot community forced the Navy to instead develop a drone for aerial refueling, a move that has since proved foolish. However, this isn't evidence of yet more stolen technology, something China does do as prolifically as it can. Instead, it's a simple case of optimal shaping. There are only so many shapes an aircraft can take and still have advanced stealth features. It's not even known if the drone pictured was really a Star Shadow drone, given that China has a prolific drone design program underway. What we do know, though, is that the Star Shadow is supposed to have a wingspan of under 50 feet, be 23 feet long, cruise as high as 50,000 feet, and be able to fly for about 12 hours. The drone will be able to carry a 900-pound payload internally, which will equate to multiple long-range air-to-air missiles or even ground attack munitions. Whether the Star Shadow ends up being China's main combat drone, what we can say in a future war is some form of Chinese low observable or even fully stealthy combat drone will be there. This will pose a significant challenge to U.S. forces, both by presenting smaller threats with even better stealth signatures than traditional aircraft and by oversaturating U.S. defenses. While China continues to lag significantly behind the U.S. in stealth technology, these drones could be stealthy enough to start threatening critical U.S. support assets such as AWACS platforms and aerial refueling aircraft. Given the U.S. will rely heavily on these assets in the case of war in the Pacific, the use of advanced Chinese combat drones could prove an overwhelming factor for the U.S. Navy and the Air Force. China will, after all, have a home field advantage, while the U.S. will have to use the air power judiciously due to the logistics of operating far from home and airfields that are widely dispersed and vulnerable to Chinese attack. H-20 stealth bomber. In development for over a decade, China has long been looking to join the U.S. as the only other world power to deploy a stealth bomber. Once more, information is incredibly limited, but we do know that the H-20 has blown past numerous projected dates for a first public flight. This could be indicative of significant development issues on the Chinese side, but even as China makes an ambitious attempt to deliver a first-gen stealth bomber, most experts agree that the H-20 is inevitable and America better be prepared for it. The H-20's primary mission will be nuclear, making up the air leg of China's nuclear triad in a similar fashion to America's B-2. It's often been questioned why the U.S. revealed the B-2 when it did during the Cold War, and the answer is simple: it was meant to deter a nuclear conflict from ever starting by showing the Soviets we had a weapon they couldn't stop. Unhappily for us, forced to meander across this mortal coil until a sweet escape of eternal oblivion, nuclear war never came, and the B-2's only combat duties have been in carrying out conventional strikes and gathering intelligence. And it's in this role that it'll be the most dangerous to U.S. forces. The B-2 might be over 40 years old, but the aircraft is still incredibly survivable, even against modern air threats. If China manages to build an aircraft that approximates the capabilities of the B-2, the U.S. could be in real trouble. China's H-20's real primary mission would inevitably be the targeting and destruction of American air defense nodes and radar installations, taking on an anti-ship role in the Pacific to knock out U.S. air defense vessels. This would leave U.S. carriers extremely vulnerable to conventional anti-ship attacks. However, with a range comparable to the B-2, The H-20 could easily carry out conventional attacks against naval installations in Hawaii, Guam, and Diego Garcia. Such a surprise attack could be devastating for U.S. leadership and command and control, especially if such a strike were to hit, for example, the Pacific Fleet headquarters. We don't know any specifics about China's H-20, but we do know that it'll have a flying wing design similar to America's B-2. This means that China has opted for stealth and the ability to penetrate deep into denied skies over speed, signaling that there is significant confidence within Chinese leadership over the H-20 stealth technologies. We know this because we can look at the design of the Su-57 and immediately identify that Russia was not confident in its stealth technology. Thus, the Su-57's designed with frontal aspect stealth and thrust vectoring, clearly indicating the aircraft is meant to get in close and dogfight, rather than strike from afar like American stealth aircraft. The fact the H-20 will sacrifice speed for stealth should be a warning sign for the U.S. military. If America has one advantage, though, it's in the deployment of stealth aircraft. It's been operating stealth aircraft for half a century now, making it the most experienced in the world in this field. This means that the U.S. has likely carefully considered the question of how to defend from stealth threats, knowing that the advent of adversarial stealth capabilities was inevitable. But is America truly prepared, or will it be caught as unprepared and helpless as its enemies have been to U.S. stealth aircraft for decades now? Type 55. It's no secret that any war between the United States and China will primarily take place in the sky and on the waves, which is why China has invested heavily into building one of the deadliest warships to roam the oceans. The Type 55 is the successor to the Type 52D, and it's like the American Arleigh Burke equivalent, a guided missile destroyer. That means its primary armament is a variety of missiles, including the YJ-18 and the YJ-21 anti-ship missiles. However, it also carries cruise missiles for land attacks and anti-submarine rockets, as well as air defense missiles for protecting surface action groups. With 112 vertical launch cells, it outnumbers the Arleigh Burke in total missile firepower, and the ship also comes equipped with double 324mm torpedo tubes. Weighing in between 11,000 and 13,000 tons, the Type 55 is significantly heavier than the Arleigh Burke as well, allowing it to pack in more capabilities. The ship's self-defense features include decoy launchers and a single 30mm Sea Whiz system that presumably can also be used to defend against small boats and drones as used by Ukraine against the Russian Navy. Its Type 346B Dragon Eye radar is estimated to have a range of about 400 kilometers. However, as usual, the Chinese aren't sharing their secrets. How advanced Chinese radar technology is and how it compares against the US is largely unknown, as no Chinese ship has yet to defend itself from enemy attack. By comparison, US ships have routinely performed interceptions of incoming missiles, drones, and aircraft, including most recently running air cover in the Red Sea against Houthi-launched missiles and drones. Unlike the Arleigh Burke, though, the Type 55 features a stealth hull design in order to limit its radar and infrared signature. While not a true stealth ship like the U.S. Zumwalt class, the Type 55 represents the future of most modern surface combatants, incorporating some stealth features without radical redesign. The ship is designed from the ground up to be the backbone of China's future carrier strike groups, adopted to perform anti-air, anti-missile, anti-ship, and anti-submarine duties. It also features a hangar with room for 2 helicopters to assist in anti-submarine operations, reconnaissance, and logistical support. Widely regarded as an extremely dangerous ship, the Type 55's development and rapid acquisition prompted the U.S. to quickly move to developing its new class of destroyer, the DDG-X. However, while the DDG-X entered its design phase in 2022, the Type 55 is already here, with 6 currently in service and another 10 projected to be built in the coming years. This is increasingly putting the United States at a steady but slow disadvantage, especially when one considers the very slow rate of shipbuilding in the U.S. Even after the DDG-X is fully designed and finalized, it'll still take years to actually produce a sizable force. America's next-generation destroyer is likely to end up in service after the conflict with China. The Type 55 represents not just a significant surface threat, but the biggest problem facing the U.S. Navy. China's shipyards have a total capacity of 23.2 million tons, compared to just 100,000 tons across all of America's shipyards. That's 232 times manufacturing advantage over America. and the reason the Chinese Navy is increasingly becoming a significant competitor to the US Navy in mass alone, if not capabilities. For now, the United States retains a significant advantage with more battle force missiles and a greater tonnage. But while US shipbuilding lags behind schedule by as much as a year or more, China's shipyards are putting out the equivalent of the entire French Navy every 4 years, and they don't seem set to slow down just yet. America's answer has been the Ghost Fleet, a fleet of unmanned vessels that are nearly fully autonomous. Already, the US Navy is trialing 3 of these vessels across the Pacific, with plans to eventually field as many as 100 additional, smaller, unmanned ships to counteract China's swarm of ships. However, it remains to be seen how the Ghost Fleet will compare to modern Chinese carrier strike groups with the Type 55 running quarterback. J-20. Developed in the mid-2000s, the J-20 is China's first attempt at a stealth aircraft, and by most accounts, a successful one. While the J-20 may not compete with the F-22 or F-35 for stealth, it has been widely hailed as a low observable and very capable fighter that's going to pose some serious problems for the US Air Force and the Navy. Much like Russia, China was aware that they were unlikely to be able to directly compete with the American 5th-generation offerings. China's aerospace sector is simply too inexperienced, and the nation has a significant problem when it comes to innovation. It's no secret China has enjoyed the benefits of much stolen technology from the West and Russia, and yet all that focus on industrial theft has left the nation underinvested in innovation and achieving its own breakthroughs. The addition of canards on the J-20 hints at its intended use in combat against America's growing 5th-gen fleet, as does the adoption of new engines that might eventually feature thrust vectoring similar to the Russian Su-57. Simply put, China isn't looking to field an all-aspect stealthy J-20 more in line with the American F-22 and F-35, but rather one that's low observable and stealthy from a head-on aspect. And that's probably going to suit China just fine in future combat. The J-20 is clearly designed to close the distance quickly and fight at close range, while remaining stealthy enough to threaten American support platforms like the AWACS and the aerial refuelers. Armed with the PL-15, the J-20 already outranges America's fighters armed with AIM-120s by as much as 20 kilometers. With its stealthy frontal aspect, J-20s could close the distance and seriously threaten vulnerable air assets and 4th-generation aircraft before turning around and beating feet back to the safety of fleet and shore-based air defense networks. Soon, though, the J-20 will carry the PL-21, which is the future upgrade to the PL-15, and will feature an even greater range, as much as 400 kilometers. With the ability to threaten aircraft from such significant ranges, and the advantage of fighting on home turf in any confrontation over the Pacific, China doesn't need to invest in an all-aspect stealth fighter the way the US does. This makes Chinese air fleets cheaper to build, acquire, and maintain, with an estimated 200 or so J-20s currently in active service and hundreds more expected to be procured. The biggest thing holding the J-20 back, though, was its engines. China has historically had great difficulties building modern engines, lagging significantly behind the West and even Russia. Underpowered and far less reliable than US engines, China's air fleet has suffered from range and availability limitations. However, the advent of the WS-15 could be changing that. A domestically produced engine, it's already been seen installed on J-20s, which observers have noted now require significantly less runway to become airborne. Engine specs are unknown given the tight operational security of the Chinese state, but historically we know that reliability has been one of the biggest hurdles to engine design for both the Chinese and the Russians. Before the WS-15, sortie rates would be significantly impacted due to a need for maintenance, especially after an initial surge period. Meanwhile, US engines have proven very reliable even during protracted combat surges. How the WS-15 will fare up in these conditions is unknown, but it's already a big step forward for China. With the WS-15, the J-20 now has the ability to super cruise and enjoys improved kinematic performance. This directly translates to a more dominant air superiority fighter, especially in close quarters, which is exactly where American stealth aircraft are weakest. The aircraft itself recently underwent an evolution as well, with the addition of new avionics, sensors, and even the use of new materials in its construction. Some Chinese sources have stated that the new J-20 may be the first contender for the title of a 5.5-generation fighter, though the Chinese media is known to regularly overstate capabilities. A twin-seat variant of the J-20 is also independently produced by its manufacturer as a demonstration project, Chengdu Aircraft Corporation. A twin-seat aircraft would likely be focused on enhanced electronic warfare capabilities and control of accompanying drone swarms, a job that it's known China is looking to adapt to the J-24. However, the fact that the US is not looking to produce a twin-seat variant to the F-35 likely indicates that China still lags behind in key technologies, such as artificial intelligence, necessitating the addition of an extra crew member for EW and drone control. Regardless, with 200 J-20s in service and the fleet growing every year, this is an aircraft that's posed to give the US Air Force and the Navy a headache in the case of a war. Type 003 Carrier. The Type 003 Fujian is a massive leap forward for the Chinese Navy and could pave the way for a fleet of advanced aircraft carriers to rival America's own. A newcomer to the aircraft carrier club, China's focus on aircraft carriers is based on two national defense priorities. The first is to be seen as a global power, impossible to do without aircraft carrier support. Modern carriers provide the necessary air wing for fleet defense and offense, without which a surface action group is very vulnerable to enemy air attack or limited in how it can project power inland. Aircraft carriers are such powerful tools of both war and diplomacy that whenever a global crisis happens, the very first question the US president asks is, where are the carriers? Aircraft carriers lend legitimacy in a way that no other warship can do. However, China needs a fleet of carriers as a national defense priority. Currently, the nation is extremely vulnerable to trade disruption via the Malacca and Hormuz Strait, where a significant amount of its global trade passes every day, including critical energy supplies. Aircraft carriers are needed to project power far from home and fend off any rival navy's attempts at enacting trade blockades. Without its own fleet of supercarriers, China will simply never be able to challenge the US and its allies on the high seas. The Type 3 has been designed as the first in its class for exactly this purpose. The ship is a significant leap ahead of both the Type 1 and Type 2, which were ski ramp-style carriers that significantly reduced the capabilities of their small attached air wings. However, the two carriers provided China with the necessary experience in dangerous and delicate carrier operations, something the nation has managed to learn to conduct with admirable speed and at a very low cost of men and material both. Learning to operate carriers historically is a dangerous lesson. The Fujian features an electromagnetic catapult, which will allow for far heavier aircraft to be launched from its dock. The ship completely skips a generation in launch capabilities by going straight to the EM launchers rather than more traditional steam launchers. This is a page right out of the Ford's playbook, but the fact that the carrier is conventionally powered and not nuclear-powered like the Ford has put into question just how many sorties the Fujian would be able to launch per day. Then there's the problem of its actual aircraft. Currently, China only operates about 60 J-15 Flying Sharks, which have been nicknamed the flopping fish by some Chinese defense officials due to the aircraft's lackluster performance. The plane is believed to be based on a reverse-engineered, unfinished Su-33 prototype purchased by China from Ukraine in 2001, and the resulting J-15 has a history of underperformance and crashes. A large aircraft, the J-15 is in dire need of new engines and lacks the critical capability of aerial refueling, something US carrier aircraft have been doing for decades. The J-15 is slated to be replaced by the FC-31, a fifth-generation carrier aircraft that will hopefully fix many of the woes of the J-15. Once China has a proven and capable carrier fighter, the Fujian will be a significant threat, though China has a ways to go yet in learning to operate its carriers. The nation has yet, for example, to conduct nighttime and high-sea state operations, something that the US Navy regularly conducts. This leaves the Fujian very vulnerable to a nighttime US attack, or one during bad weather, which is exactly when America's carrier force is likely to strike. With an estimated 7 to 9 Type 3-sized carriers to be acquired by the Chinese Navy, though, in 2 decades the US could be facing its first carrier competition since World War II. Now go check out China's worst military mistakes in history, or click this other video instead.